I'm Adam Walker, a biometrics consultant, and this is the Pharma Prescribed podcast, where leaders, innovators, and hidden voices in healthcare open up. No sound bites, no spin, just raw insight, one prescription at a time. In an industry driven by data, protocols, and pressure, we rarely pause to ask the human questions. What drives us? What breaks us? And what truths live behind the titles we wear? Today's guest is Lisa Kerr, Head of Patient Engagement at Evinova, AstraZeneca's health tech business, where she brings over 2 decades of experience spanning global pharmaceutical and health tech organizations. Lisa has built a career on getting to the root cause of issues that others walk past. A passionate advocate for inclusion and equity, Lisa founded AstraZeneca's Safe Space Employee Resource Group and the Inclusion and Diversity Network at Evinova, creating spaces where people can show up fully as themselves. A champion for LGBTQIA+ rights, neurodivergent communities, and trauma survivors, Lisa is channeling that passion into voluntary trustee work with charities at the sharp end of mental health and diversity. Lisa, it's a pleasure to welcome you today. For those of our audience who are not familiar with you, what is the mission you're on?
Thanks, Adam, and it's lovely to be here. The mission that I am on, I am really passionate about people and science and happiness. And I think the mission that I'm on, and I've taken my time in my career to get here, is to really champion the role of lived experience in the decisions that we make in the healthcare industry, both in terms of the work we do with and for patients, but also as employers with our employees and throughout the wider community. We have so many intelligent, wonderfully talented people in our industry who don't truly understand what it's like to live with the conditions that we look to treat and don't design our products or our trials for them. And that's what I really want to change. And that's my mission.
I think that's an incredible mission. And I'm wondering where that originally came from, that passion and that drive inside of you, Lisa, to make the difference to patients and also embed yourself in an organization as significant as AstraZeneca, where you were able to do that.
I think that's been a long time coming, and my path into the industry was a very much more straightforward one. I have a degree and a PhD in chemistry. I joined AstraZeneca fresh out of my PhD and worked in the analytical labs in drug development. So learning the ropes on how you develop active drug substances, the tablets, the inhalers, and had my kind of good grounding in the science. And all I ever really wanted to do, to be honest, was to be successful, to go up the ladder, to fulfill the academic promise that everyone saw in me. And I went up that ladder and I got, probably when I was around 40, to the role that I thought was like my career goal. So I was a global pharmaceutical project director in DMC world. I think that's the best job. There are other more senior jobs in that department, but it's the best job. You're accountable for the development from raw materials to finished product and all of the regulatory filings for a set of development projects or commercial brands. And you're also part of those global product teams within the business where you sit with commercial, with regulatory, with clinical, with operations, and really understanding how the business works. So it's the most interesting, most full breadth role I'd ever been in. And when I got to that point, I was like, oh man, there's got to be something else. And where the something else came from then was really rooted in my personal life. I'd always been the good girl. I'd always been the one that got the straight A's and the first in her degree and followed the path. But with that sense of expectation of perfection comes a huge burden. And that manifested in my life as depression. I lived with that for all my adult life. When I was in this kind of critical 30 to 40 range, I had an experience really changed things for me. So I was married. I had a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. And I realized I was in a relationship that didn't serve me and didn't allow me to be fully who I was. And that was not an example I wanted to set for my daughter. So I got divorced. And when you're divorcing and a single mum, also with a busy career, I have what I call my fall off the cliff edge of life moment. So I pulled myself up several times, and then one more thing happened and I crumbled. So I was an outpatient at the Priory for 3 months. I was there 3 days a week to start with. My psychiatrist told me I had moderate to severe clinical depression at the time. When I was well, he told me it was severe. I think probably if I was not a single mum with those two beautiful children, I would have been an inpatient. That's how unwell I was. But I was really lucky in that I got access to healthcare quickly. And I got access to that because a very dear friend of mine at work had been through similar struggles and had been really open about it. And he did one of those things that I always advise people to do, and that's ask people how they are twice. So he caught me at the coffee team, how are you? And I was like, yeah. And he's, no, how are you really? And I told him. And then when I had my fall off the cliff edge moment, I knew I was not right. And I rang him and I said, Chris, I'm not well. What do I do? And he's like, right, get a pen and a piece of paper, write this down. You need to go and see your GP. You need to tell them you want a referral to the Priory. You ring the Priory and you tell them this. Here is the AXA number for the healthcare that we have through AZ. You ring them, tell them you've got a GP referral, and then you will be there within a week. Those are the steps. Do them in that precise order. And I'm here and I'm coming round to have coffee with you and stuff. And that was the start of my kind of real journey into mental health. And after I got well from that, that started me on the path of mental health advocacy, because I honestly don't know where I would have been if I hadn't had Chris to turn to ask for that advice, because I was in such a bad way. I have a degree and a PhD in chemistry and I'm really clever, but I couldn't have found my way through all of the kind of different places where that information lived on the internet. I couldn't have put that path together for myself. I wasn't capable. I was barely capable of getting out of bed and having a shower and eating breakfast. That was a huge challenge. So that was the kind of point in my life that really flipped my understanding of lived experience with a condition and what that actually does to people's lives and their ability to function.
Firstly, I want to just acknowledge your honesty and openness in sharing that, Lisa. And for those of our audience who are not familiar, I've also worked at AstraZeneca, and I remember the first time we came across one another in one of those safe space calls. And I knew from that moment that you were like me. And as you described your experiences of mental health and your deterioration, it's so analogous to my experience that happened to me 15, 16 years ago as well. So I really, really do want to thank you for sharing that, because there will be people who listen to this who might not be aware that there are tools and there are means out there to support people when they're going through mental health crises. And you were fortunate, as I was, that we were both working for large organizations that had these mechanisms in place. For many people these days, it's harder and harder to get hold of those mental health services, is it not?
It is so hard. And there's a ever greater need and a further demand. And I actually read Mind have released a report this week about the lived experience of people trying to access and healthcare. And they rated the experience as being either you're too unwell and we can't treat you, or we're not going to listen to you. So people with really serious disorders like schizophrenia or personality disorder or bipolar, who they say, well, you're complex and you don't fit in my box, so I can't help you. You need somebody else to help you, but you don't fit in anybody's box, therefore nobody helps you. Or people who are living with conditions that are still very stigmatized, and then they say you're being paranoid or you don't know what you're saying and you can't make decisions, so that people's views that aren't considered in their own healthcare or people on the opposite end of the spectrum with depression who are told to cheer up. I do remember somebody telling me when I was really ill to just pull my socks up, and I was like, I can't even find my socks, never mind pull them up. Those people are told they're simply not ill enough. And where I've really seen that firsthand is in child and adolescent mental health services. 2 out of 3 of the children that live with me, 2 are biologically mine, 1 is not, have had their challenges with the mental health service. When you go to the GP with scars because your children are self-harming, and then you are told that does not meet the threshold for referral to CAMHS, for many people, there isn't another option. They're just left there to deal with that by themselves. And it's like telling people with a broken ankle, just go sit over there for 6 weeks and wait for it to fix itself. It's completely unacceptable. And so they don't intervene until we didn't get a referral to CAMHS until overdose territory. And even then, recognised the private support we had and said, we're not going to be able to give you any more than that. So suggest you go, off you go and continue to pay for it yourself, which is just not on. And that's a social divide that is really unfair, that the people who actually often need it most are those who don't have access to it. And you don't get access to it really until it's too late.
I couldn't agree with you more around that particular point, Lisa. And indeed, it shouldn't get to that point where people are so desperate for the help that they have to physically act out. You've taken that lived experience into your working experience and your working life, and you've made those enormous changes within an organization as large as AstraZeneca. You must have overcome an awful lot of inertia within the organization, I'm guessing, to have got it to a place where there are thousands of people dialing in every week to different safe spaces. I'd love to just hear how that came about, because I can only speak as someone who regularly dialed into those safe spaces for whichever particular cause it was. I'd love to hear more.
So I remember we had this little group. There was me and my colleague, and then there were other people. So I started informally talking about my experiences when I got back to the office, because I knew how impactful that had been for me. And another colleague of mine who works in HR was like, we kind of have this little dirty underground network of people who know that I've been there, you've been there, you're safe to talk to. It was this underground network, but nobody was talking about it in public. And as an organization, we got, what's it called? Workplace. So the kind of Facebook for work. And I remember seeing on there the AZ Pride stuff. And I joined the AZ Pride network. I went on the Stonewall training with them, which was fantastic. And I actually thank the Pride network for probably putting me on this kind of ally advocacy path, because we were one of the first to stand up and do it, and did such an amazing job. And I remember thinking, crikey, there must be something for mental health on workplace. So I went and looked for it, and I was like, there isn't one. I was like, I'm going to make a page then. So I made a page, because anyone could make a page. I'm still mourning the loss of the We Love Dogs page from Workplace, because that was a dose of positivity in my work feed that I needed every day. So I made one, and then I was actually going through a challenging period and accessing therapy services at the time. And I posted about it. So I recorded a video saying, this is how I'm feeling, and this are the things that I've done to get help. And I honestly felt physically sick. I was like, is this the end of my career? What have I done? And the response was amazing. So I invited 50 people that I knew to be part of the group. And then it just snowballed. We ran an event in Macclesfield site for Time to Talk Day a couple of months after that. And so many people came along, and we got cakes. We had the wonderful sponsor. She became the sponsor of the network, but was always right behind us from day one, which was Juliet White. And we were like, Juliet, can you give us money for cakes for this? And she's absolutely. And I remember one of the members of the Network of Women, which was a newly formed employee resource group, said to me, like, Lisa, this is really good, but you need to be an ERG because that gives you the structure around this. So the employee resource groups, and we had a formal process for that, and we went through the formal application process, and it grew organically. And then we became an employee resource group and properly backed by the business. And then it just expanded. And we got folks from the US, from Sweden joining. We set up all the different country chapters. So I think we've got chapters in about 8 different countries now, as well as the global network. And this was probably a year or two before COVID. Kind of COVID blew the roof off, because while people were like, yes, it's fine, you can talk about this and talk about mental health. And it was generally pretty well received, actually. And we got lots of invites to go and talk to teams and talk about lived experience, which was really positive. The need to support people with massive change, obviously, all organizations recognized that. So I remember in 2020, we'd set like a goal of we need to raise awareness. And COVID just did that for us. So we had a fantastic tool that we developed in our kind of first year as an ERG, which was just a simple flowchart. So you remember me talking about my experience of not being able to find the information I need through the myriad of health websites. We also had like different routes. So you could go to the employee assistance program. You can have access to 5 sessions of counselling, or you could get referred through the healthcare, through to everything from counselling to full psychiatric inpatient care. And people weren't always being directed to the right one. So we were actually having issues with people not getting the support they needed. And one actually dear close friend of mine, she'd been put down that 5 sessions only path when she really needed to be on the other one, and she didn't know where to go. And she saw my video. And when I said, actually, this is the steps you need to go through to get this help. And she said, again, I don't know where I would have been if I hadn't have seen that. So we put a flowchart together that said, do you need immediate help? Yes, no. Do you want help inside the organization or outside? And are you just having a kind of life event and you need some help? Or are you actually feeling really unwell and you need some proper support? Here's the numbers to call. Here's the people to email. So it was just just handed it out on leaflets at our events. That turned in COVID into the global mental health ebook. So we turned that flowchart into a flowchart for every single country. And the business took that up and made that happen. And that ended up, as we go into our tech world, not a PDF, but we actually have within AstraZeneca now an app called Healthy Mind that's part of Microsoft Teams. And it built that simple flowchart structure into a Teams app. Microsoft loved the idea so much, they did it for free, because they said, 1, this is really simple, and 2, this is brilliant. And so they worked with us for free. And like we said, you go take the framework and use that elsewhere, obviously, so that you can in Teams go to any country and in any language and understand what support is available to you in that country. And in particular, that managers can also go and look at what support is available in other countries, because we work in such a global organization. You often have people who are managing other people in different locations. So it still shocks me sometimes when I talk about this, that actually started with me making a workplace group and posting a video, but it did. And it's honestly the thing I'm most proud of in my career. And other than my children, my life, I would say.
Honestly, Lisa, it's remarkable. And I think what's so extraordinary is that you turned your lived experience, as well as your capabilities and your technical know-how, into something as a force for good that has clearly crossed boundaries and geographies and all manner of stereotypes, genders, you name it, every different vertical of difference, including neurodiversity and the like. It's remarkable. And I think it's an incredible thing to be able to say that you've done. But How on earth do you do that alongside being a working mum and holding down the role that you are in a day job that clearly has enormous pressures from a very senior position?
So a lot of people have asked me that actually. And when I first started out on this journey, they were like, you are so brave. And how do you do this? And actually talking about my mental health was challenging to start with, but it also brought meaning to my experience. And I've done a lot of reflection over the past few years. I went through a career mastermind course where it gets you to look at the events in your life and how they have changed and shaped you. And each difficulty and challenge that I've had in my life, something has come out of it. And it means there's a point to me having gone through that. If I can share what I've been through and I can help just one person, then good has come from the pain that I've lived through. And that's what sustains me. People ask me, how do I do it? And I do it because it genuinely gives me energy. There are things I have to do in my day job. And when I was setting this up, there was lots of stressful, serious business problems to challenge, and also a lot of very boring checking of spreadsheets and budgets and resource planning and all of that really good stuff that means that the work gets done. But I would do this because it gave me energy and it gave me meaning and it was aligned with purpose. And the journey that I've been on from my career from that role onwards is to align my career with my purpose. And fundamentally, I think I was put on this earth to do good. And that's what drives me, and help people live better, be happier in whatever part of my life that will be, and to have fun too. Those safe space conversations sometimes were really deep and moving, but also we had a lot of fun. It actually, in some of those conversations and the feeling that we're not alone, and you can occasionally get a bit of gallows humor, like when I was in the Priory and there was a lot of group therapy. So there was a kind of a little gang of us, and we would sit there and they would separate the alcoholics from the people with depression. And we used to call us the glummers and the gluggers. Being able to have a bit of sense of humor about some of this stuff too is really funny. And if people think my ideas are a bit crazy, I'm like, yeah, I know I have a clinical diagnosis for that, so it's fine.
It's so remarkable to hear you speak about it in those terms as well. The third group that I thought you were going to mention was the one that I also saw when I was an inpatient, was sadly the young girls with the eating disorders. And I had never seen anything quite like that until I saw it firsthand. And that was quite traumatic to see firsthand and to be alongside those groups as well. Did you have any experience of that yourself?
They tended to keep the eating disorder patients very much to themselves. So we would occasionally see them in the canteen, but a lot of the time they were in a separate unit, in separate kitchen. But there was one therapy class I was in, which was this kind of life mapping thing. And there was a young man who was living with an eating disorder. And it was really interesting to understand what he was going through. And I know I was really ill when I went in there, but what I learned, like, I think everyone should just go and have a spell in there, to be honest. What I learned about people and the different challenges people have, and often I think it boils down to there is some kind of event that happens that causes people to not be able to cope or function, and they find unhelpful coping strategies. Self-harm is one that my kids have used. Alcohol was one I used. And for some people, it's controlling their food intake and their exercise. So this guy, he'd been the little short one, didn't grow until he was like 17, 18, and had a really challenging self-image of himself. And then all of a sudden he shot up to sort of 6'4" and couldn't cope with it. And he would restrict his calorie intake, but also exercise to the point of absolute exhaustion. And that's something I couldn't wrap my head around. It would never be a choice I would make, but it's so interesting to see how different things and different people's brains work in different ways, and the choices that they make and how they cope with whatever life throws at them. I met so many amazing people in there, and a valuable experience, I think, that teaches you a huge amount about life.
Dare I say it, when you've hit rock bottom, the only way is up. And you talked about perfectionism earlier, and many people define their own perfectionism differently, don't they? The overriding experience I got from that as well was actually that I wasn't that bad. There were many people that were in many of these groups that I was participating in, and I found I had words to describe the feelings and the emotions. There were other people in the room that just didn't, and they were really struggling with it. And I could see progression during that period of time, because as we did more and more of those sessions of self-actualization and various CBT and one-on-ones, and we always finished with kind of meditative visualization where I always fell asleep. I was always the one falling asleep and snoring at the end and waking up and there was no one left in the room. That was me. But yeah, I just took away from it over that period of time that really I had tools with which I could then translate back into my family, my life, and everything thereafter. And I didn't feel anything like as bad. Of course, medication has a huge part to play in that, and certainly did for me for a while. But I just think you really do give a rich insight into your experiences, and I can't thank you enough for being so honest and open about that. And I think that really does embed the human in you into an organization like AZ and Evinova, because what I wanted to do was just translate that into the day to day, because your lived experience and patient engagement, the two go hand in hand, really, don't they? Because effectively what you're describing is, as a patient, as an end user, as someone who is receiving medication, services, and more broadly, healthcare, and then you're embedded in an organization where you are acting upon that. It's like that reverse lens, isn't it? Could you just elaborate a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I'm really privileged to have been able within my career to make that shift. And it translates very strongly. And the role I'm in now is the most closely aligned to purpose I've ever had. And I am that voice in the room that says, do you understand what you are asking of people? Clinical trials are designed by scientists for regulators and payers, right? Sometimes we do patient insights as part of the clinical trial process. More often than not, the protocol is locked in. It's handed over to ClinOps, and then we start thinking about recruitment, retention, patient-facing materials. And almost we treat patient recruitment as this kind of numbers game we have to play. So my role sits within the innovative patient recruitment team. And I think it's the best place to start with patient engagement, because what we do is we say, we've designed this study and this is what's going to make us some money. And this is what is going to change health outcomes. And here are all the endpoints that we need to get the data we need to get an approval and make money. And patients either get access to a trial because their doctor has said to them, I think this might be a good option for you. Or there are a percentage of people, more often in rare disease space or in the oncology space, who are actively looking for things. But most people aren't even aware that clinical trials really exist, what they're for. A lot of people think they're only a thing for cancer. And so they really are actually a healthcare option to access innovative healthcare and to move research forward. But we don't present it like that. The analogy that I use for people, and recently we published a report that we did with ISPEP, the International Society for Patient Engagement Professionals, on innovation in patient recruitment. And we have the EACH framework, which stands for education and awareness, accessibility, patients as consumers, and healthcare collaboration. And I'll go back to the consumer piece. If we were selling trainers, right? If AstraZeneca was Adidas, we would be out of business, right? Because Joe Public wouldn't pay us for what we deliver. So if you actually treat a clinical trial as a product for the person who's going to invest in it, we think, oh, that's the business. That's the investors. those are the people that need to invest. They invest money. Patients invest their time, their own health, and their trust. And not just their time, often their family's time too. So that is a huge investment. And they give that to us for free. Most trials, people aren't compensated because of competition and not giving people incentives and biasing things on the compliance status. We'll often go through the process of we will reimburse you for your travel experiences, but patients have to stump that up front. My mission is to say, hang on, this isn't actually the way that you need to do things to help people. But more importantly, it's not a very sensible way to do business. If you want people to join your trials, then design trials for them. We have, I think, as an industry, about 5 to 7% of eligible patients ever join clinical trials. So there is 90 to 95% of people who are eligible to join a trial that don't. That figure has shifted by between 1 or 2%, depending on which therapy area you're in over the last 10 years. So we've gone through digitisation, we've gone through healthcare transformation, and we haven't done anything. We're still chasing, as an industry, that same slice of people who know about or seeing a physician who's involved in clinical research and getting access to it. One, we need to be talking about it a lot more as an industry. And two, we need to design trials for patients and with patients, because what doctors think patients need is not what patients need. My personal example of here's all of the healthcare information you need to get mental health support. Any sensible, rational person should be able to access that. I wasn't sensible and rational at the time, and I couldn't access it. And I'm probably one of the top few percent of educated people with a great support network around me. So for those people who are in a less fortunate position, we're making it impossible. And we have to do better for people. And also, if the industry wants to continue to grow, we have to do it from a business perspective too.
Yeah, that really resonates with me. And just to, I think, echo your experience as well from the inside out, I was recently diagnosed with a condition, and only as a result of having mentioned that I worked in clinical research was I offered the opportunity to go on a clinical trial to fast track that particular procedure. And I was thinking, like you, hang on a minute, why is that not the first conversation, not the last conversation before the phone is being put down? Because I've had to advocate for my parents over many years. And what I've experienced with them and through their experiences of being their patient advocate has been exactly that. If you don't ask, you don't get. If you're not shaking the bell or knocking on the door really hard, you drop down the priority list. You've got to be that person that's having the conversations and asking the questions all the time. And I just found that so extraordinary that this particular procedure has over a year-long waiting list. As a result of this one comment I made, I could potentially have that procedure within the next 6 to 8 weeks. As simple as that. And it's the same procedure. It's just there's two control arms, both giving the same procedure, but one has a 2-year follow-up with 3 monthly interventions through medical advice. I'm happy with whichever one. But as I say, to your point, unless you ask, you don't get. But also, the services and the capability and offering of clinical trials should be far more embedded. And I speak to many other people in and around patient recruitment on this podcast, patient advocates, caregivers for children, pediatrics, and elderly people who can't ask for themselves. And this is the point, isn't it? In underserved groups, those people really do fall by the wayside. And it can be about education. It can certainly be about financial capabilities. And I'm speaking as somebody who doesn't have private healthcare. I'm just trying to get the best from the UK NHS that I think I should be entitled to.
Yeah, 100%. We're lucky that we have the NHS. Actually, the private healthcare I've had through AstraZeneca is amazing. The situation in other countries is even more disparate. There, I actually think the role of clinical trials is even more important in providing people access to things that, with an insurance-based healthcare system, can be beyond many people's reach.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. But Lisa, is there anything today that we haven't spoken about that I should have asked you?
So one thing that springs to mind on this particular problem, actually, and it's part of my role in a health tech company, and it is the word of the moment, it's AI. I actually think AI, so I'm not going to let you ask a question. I'm just going to tell you what I think. That's all right, isn't it?
Of course.
AI, I think, blows the excuse for the industry out of the water that personalized communications and education and bringing in patient insight data into the design process is too slow and too expensive. It is not. So I got asked a question on a panel recently, is like, what two things would you say to the industry to do if they could do something tomorrow? So the first thing I said is get access to structured patient insight data. A lot of people are like, but you have to go and have a meeting with a bunch of patient advocates and talk to them. And you can absolutely do that. I would say do that to add the color to the structured data that you have, because there are loads of companies out there with this data now. So you can go and have a look at what are the concerns and what are the barriers and what are the opportunities that are right there for that particular patient population that you're looking at. And also, can you segment it? Is it different for men? Is it different for women? Is it different for people in the US versus the UK versus China? So there is all of that data out there. There is no reason for you now to say, oh, it's going to cost me 200,000 to pay some agency to go and do that. You can get access to that. You can do the analysis in hours. So the industry has no excuse not to do it. The other thing is then to actually take that and compute that into the success of your trial. So where I would really love to see industry is building the patient experience into the probability of technical and regulatory success. So that is the number that when you're developing a trial, you go, this is how much it's going to take for me to run this phase 3 program. This is the proposed revenue when this drug comes to market with the label that we propose. And then that is moderated by that PTRS. So if you've got a probability of 50% or 90%, then that's the revenue that gets stacked up against the cost of doing it. So actually, if you're doing something and you haven't thought about the patient population and you haven't designed for the patients, then your probability needs to come down. And so actually make trials less investable if they don't actually address the patient experience. And then the third thing with that is, in terms of producing materials to communicate with patients, social media is out there. Pharma is very quiet on social media. We're traditionally very conservative. There is a huge amount of misinformation out there. And I've written an article that's somewhere on LinkedIn about the dangers of misinformation through AI. So what AI is really good at is answering a question in a really confident, coherent manner and hallucinating where it doesn't have information, or it is pulling from the wrong information, because most standard LLMs will pull only from what's publicly available. Often the really good scientific data, like the research data, is behind paywalls where you have to pay for access to the papers and stuff. So I do use AI, like in particular for supporting my parents when they send me their scan results. And I've got them to start doing chat GPTs of their own results. But you have to, I read through it and I read what it's translated it to, and I read what is there, and I double check the terms, and I go back and make sure that makes sense. But that's because I have the scientific background I have. Most people don't. And when you read something that is confidently sounding, that can be really dangerous. And actually, there was an analysis done on, I forget which model it was. It's listed in the article I wrote, where AI gets it wrong in terms of diagnosis a lot of the time. So a lot of the time it misses when people really need to go to the ER, or tells them to go to the ER when actually they probably just need to put a plaster on and some ice. So that is the kind of other area that I think as an industry we really need to step up in to combat the misinformation, because those people who are actually out there spreading stuff, and I've seen so much in terms of supplements and that kind of thing, that make claims that are absolutely medically unverifiable and factually, scientifically incorrect. They aren't bound by the regulations that we are. And so they can get away with saying whatever they like. And I think we have a role to play as custodians of the science. Every pharma company talks about wanting to make the world a better place and improve health outcomes. This is a really important piece that actually I think we need to be doing more in.
I wholeheartedly agree with that, Lisa. And on that particular point, are you able to reassure our listeners and viewers that that is currently happening within an organization like AstraZeneca and their competitors?
It absolutely is. So that's definitely what we are working on. And we're building AI tools that pull from all of the right systems and building profiles within the agents that we're developing that pull from our interviews with the clinicians and the scientific experts and saying, these are all of the things that this person would bring to, a review of a protocol, and accessing the vast databases of years and years of rigorous scientific research that we've done to bring that to bear. I think when we start to get these things out in the public domain, there's more that we could do. But absolutely responsible, scientifically led AI is really what Evinova is about, both in making the drug development process faster, but also improving the service from the beginnings of a clinical trial recruitment through to support in our digital apps in the trial. So that's 100% what we're about.
That's really reassuring for me to hear, as much as for everyone that's following this conversation. At this point, Lisa, I'd always like to conclude with a quick fire round. And I'm wondering, what is the one piece of advice you would give to your younger self?
Back yourself, you're more awesome than you think. And that's, I'm going to do too, because it's me. And don't stop singing.
Wonderful. What are the top 3 qualities you value most when building a team?
The top 3 qualities: honesty, trying to find the right word. Diversity sounds like a cop-out, but I really enjoy working with people who have different experience and understanding to me. So I love working with someone who will be honest with me, thinks differently, and will tell me that, and a sense of humour. I find it very hard to work with people who don't have a sense of humour. That's just me personally. That's not like a business prerequisite, but honestly, like, you spend a lot of time at work, and if it ain't fun, that's a bit rubbish, isn't it?
Completely agree with that. What is your favorite theme outside of work?
Singing. So I sing in a rock and pop covers band, and yeah, this is a professional podcast. I would say it is the most enjoyable thing you can legally do in public.
And finally, what is your number 1 golden rule in life and in business, Lisa?
My number 1 golden rule in life and in business. Oh, people are awesome.
I agree. Lisa, you've shared so much honesty and truth around how you came into this industry, what you've done since you've been in it, and indeed how you've translated those personal traits, characteristics, and qualities into the person that we see in front of us today. It's been so enlightening, and I wouldn't say it's exceeded my expectations, because I know you're awesome, by the way, because I've spent enough time with you to see those behaviors. But really, you have just brought so much truth and honesty to this conversation. It's just been wonderful to spend some time in your company. What's the best way, if anyone wants to get in contact with you, to make contact with you, Lisa?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Lisa Kerr. Often on there, you will see many of my different musings, from talking about work to poetry and singing. So if you want to know anything about that, you can hit me up on LinkedIn. If you're interested in my singing career, the band that I'm in is called The Tourists, TORRISTS. It's a local thing. It's a local band for local people. We're on Instagram and Facebook. So if you want to watch me, singing my heart out, you can find us on there too.
Thank you so much. Lisa, once again, it's been a delight to welcome you on Pharma Prescribed today. And just want to thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been so much fun to do it and also so much fun to reconnect. I know when we had the preamble call, yeah, it's always good to meet those people that you know you have a connection with and you haven't quite had a chance to fully explore that. I'm sure this won't be the last discussion we have.
I hope not. And thank you again.